Hi guys, my name is Karthik and I am from easyautomation.com and welcome to another video of our EA Weekly. And today we're going to talk about when to start automation and what to automate. So this is one of the most important question like a lot of people are really talking about, and this is kind of an interview question, but it is not an interview question, guys. This is something which most of us really need to know about, and there are some confusion among the community, and we are going to be talking about that in this particular video. Alright, so let's get started. So before discussing about what to automate and when to start automation, let's discuss about the testing pyramid. So the testing pyramid is kind of something which people usually refer while starting to talk about what to automate and when to start the automation testing, because this is kind of becoming like a de facto of the automation testing to be taken before you jump into starting to do an automation for your organization for an application. So what is this testing pyramid? So for discussing about testing pyramid, we need to go back 10 years back, which is on 2009. Mike Cohn really represented in his book on automation testing pyramid. So basically it is not testing pyramid, it is automation testing pyramid, and for some reason the automation was just faded off because a lot of engineering people on testing started to use this and it became like an testing pyramid, but it is not like an automation testing pyramid. But in reality, the author actually represented it as an automation testing pyramid. So if you see in this automation testing pyramid, it actually has automated unit test, automated integration test, and automated UI test. So it's completely automated, by the way, and we'll be discussing about this automated fashion of how to work with these kinds of testing within this particular pyramid. So as you can see in this particular pyramid, you have three layers basically. The one is the unit testing layer, and the next one is the integration testing layer, another one is the UI testing layer. So as you can see that the unit testing is something pretty straightforward. You can tell that the unit testing is going to have a complete test which is written by developers, which is going to be addressing exactly how the application is built and how the developer has actually written the code for that particular module, just that particular module or the functionality. And the integration test, you can easily say that it is going to be something which is representing how your application is going to work by 2 or 3 different integration of an APIs or service and things of that nature. The last one is the UI testing. So UI testing is where our work comes in, which is like Selenium or Cypress or many different tools that you can name around, and that's what we are actually working, and that's what we have been talking about in our Execute Automation channel all these days. But now let's quickly see like what is this each and every layer actually has and who has the responsibility of writing this particular code within these layers. So for instance, in the unit testing layer, you can see that there are a lot of unit test codes written by developers, which are more like an isolated code that I said before, and these are running in isolation, so they don't really run with real data or something like that. They usually run in a mock data to see how the actual functionality of a particular module works. So as that said, you can see that this is not an complete end-to-end scenario. It is just for that particular module that you're actually testing an application and see how the functionality of that particular feature actually works. So that's what is actually this unit testing comprise. So you can see that for any given module, you can have more than like 10 or 15 unit testing, or I'm just saying a number here, but it can be any number of unit testing, and they run pretty faster than compared to any testing that you have written in other two layers. And the next one is actually the integration test. So the integration test, now you can ask like, who owns integration test? Is that a developer or an automation test engineer? For sure, it's not manual test engineer. So who is going to own this integration test? Well, again, depends on whom you're going to be giving this particular task. For instance, if you're going to be asking a developer to do the integration test, developer usually struggle on writing the unit test itself. So if you ask a developer to write a lot of unit test cases during a pressure release, they probably are going to end up writing few unit test cases which are pretty critical. Not all of these functionalities available within an application, because your application has to be released first of all. So if you ask them to write an integration test, for sure they're not going to be writing any integration test at this particular point. So it is going to be more likely end up with an amalgamation of both a developer and an automation test engineer. So I will come back to this integration layer later. Let's discuss about the UI testing. So the UI testing, as we all know, that it is Selenium or Cypress or Core.ui or whatever different tools that you name it. So these tools actually sits on the UI layer of an pyramid layer that you are seeing here, and it actually has a lot of fragile testing. That's what the test automation pyramid actually represents. And they say that this is kind of very fragile, this is kind of very easy to break, but that layer actually represents the actual end-to-end testing of your application. So it is not something that your code is going to run in isolation. You cannot just mimic writing a mock data for the UI layer and see how the code actually works. You can at least have a test data in this case, but not a mock data there. So you should have a complete real data or maybe a production data being cloned as a test data, and then you can use within this particular UI layer, and then you can start using it. So that's what is this particular UI layer is all about, and that's what is this UI testing comprises for an end-to-end automation. And this is for sure should be done by an automation test engineer. So the middle layer that I was talking about, the integration, is more likely going to fall within the amalgamation of both a developer and tester. So mostly developer gives all the information by like giving the information on the Swagger documentation if it is an API, or maybe the services for the Windows service or maybe a Linux service. They tell you all the information like how you're going to consume that particular service or how this particular service integrates and work together, and then how it actually talks to a real application or a mock data layer of our application, and then how everything works. So they give all the information to us, and this is our job as an automation tester to use those information to automate the application. But now the next question comes. So which layer takes the highest precedence? Is that the unit testing layer or integration or the UI testing layer? So let's talk about the unit testing layer. So as you can see, the unit testing layer is going to be written by developers, and most of the code is written in such a way that they run in an isolation, and they also run in a mock data, which means they are not pretty close to the actual end-to-end scenario that a customer actually works. And then let's not talk about the integration testing layer here yet. Let's talk about the UI testing layer. So if you see the UI testing layer, this is where the actual customer interaction happens. So your customer opens up an application by logging in, and then he enters the username and password, he goes in there, or maybe he fills a form there, and then he clicks the submit button to see if the particular form has been submitted or not. So if this registration process is going to be something that you're going to be dealing with within the UI of your application, even though that particular UI of an application has got 4 or 5 APIs being called, but in reality, UI layer is where the user interacts, and he wants to see how the user actually interacts with the particular UI without any problem or without any glitch in that particular UI. And then integration layer. So this is where all the APIs comes into picture. So your API is going to contain all the different sort of functionality of your application. It can be something which is being consumed by the UI of your application, or it can be an API which is being consumed by your backend of your application. So it's not something which is user facing unless until it is a public facing API. But if it is not a public facing API, for sure testing the integration part is more relevant if your API is going to be addressing the actual use case or the scenarios of your application. So for instance, let's take a banking application. So if a banking application is going to have few APIs where those APIs are not something which are consumed by the public or general public, then probably automating those not public facing APIs is not that feasible, I guess, because as you know, in banking application there can be like millions or maybe hundreds or thousands of APIs being called for a particular functionality or a particular flow. For instance, it is a loan flow or maybe a credit card flow. So you can see that there are so many different flows available within a banking application, and you can see that that particular APIs for a particular flow, it can be hundreds of APIs being called. So if you test that particular flow with all these particular APIs, because the API parameters value are going to be changing for each and everything, you need to have a clear understanding of how that particular API actually works. The time that you invest to see how that API actually works is more than the time that you invest in the UI of your application automation. So basically you'd invest more time in the integration part while you see this kind of API than in the UI automation itself. And of course the next question that comes is, UI is very fragile, it can break any time, but API is something which is going to remain forever. Not sure about that. So if it remains like that, then probably which I don't think, that if it is not a public facing APIs, your API is likely to gonna change, or maybe there will be like a V2 or V3 of such API, and that's the API which is going to be consumed by your UI rather the actual V1 or V0 or something like that. So basically the developers, what they do is like they're gonna put some APIs with some values in it, and they sometimes handle that in the context of the UI, and they handle some of the UI itself, like the JavaScript handling, the client side handling is going to be happening not from the API basically. As you know, the client side is becoming very, very richer right now. It's there richer for a pretty long time now. All the email ID identification or the password strength and all those things are basically done from the client side itself, rather directly going to the server from the API. So as that said, if you see the actual flow which takes the highest precedence, you could probably answer very quickly that which one takes the actual precedence. And once again, it depends on the kind of application that you're working as well. So for seeing that, I'm actually going to show you a demo in my machine for two popular websites in New Zealand, and I will quickly show you how the registration of an application actually works. So now I'm going to open the TradeMe website, e-commerce website. So in here, I'm just going to go and register as a user. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give a very, very super bad email address. As you can see in here, it has this and then this. And you can see that this email address is not even close to a valid email address. I've just entered that, and I'm just going to enter a valid password in here. You can see that it is kind of working. You can see it also goes to an ASHX file, which is going to be an API which is verifying whether this particular password is correct or not. So this is the functionality of the password checking, the strength checking. So that's happening with an XHR. And then I'm going to enter an user here, which maybe I'm just going to give 5. And then I'm going to give a valid email username, and I'm just going to enter some date here. And the phone number, and then I'm just going to type the address. So once I type the address, you can see that it's going to once again call an API at this point of time. You can see an address suggestion.ashx file, and this is going to populate the address for me over here, right? So you can see that this particular email address is now wrong, which is not correct format. So once I create this particular, maybe the password is not matching. Let me do that. And this guy seems to be exist. So maybe I just make like that. You can see that it would have told me that it is not matching before. For some reason, it's not telling that. But now if I try to create a user, you can see that the user has been created with an invalid email address. So the UI was not verified over here in the client side. Neither an API actually verifies that. It actually works without any problem for the TradeMe website. But if you think that this email address may be a valid one, and that's the reason I'm going to go to the warehouse website of New Zealand once again, and I'm going to do a registration over here, and I'm going to enter the valid username, last name, and for the email address, I'm going to enter the same email address that I entered in the TradeMe website. And once I go to the password, maybe even before that, if I just try to open the developer console over here, and you can see that the email address is now verified as it's not the valid email address. So it says that this is an invalid email address. So it is not even going to an API or the backend to verify whether this is a valid email address or not, because it is actually handled within the UI component itself. So basically this is handled in the client side validation rather going to the UI. For sure, the email address was not valid, but still TradeMe could able to create an valid user for me with that particular invalid email address. So maybe it's going to throw me an API error if you would have tested that in the API side because it is not a valid email address, but the UI actually slipped that. Whereas in this particular case, the UI actually caught that particular error and it didn't even went to the API. So now tell me, when is this particular API actually pitch in? So you can see that the particular UI handling for the TradeMe website is completely different from the warehouse website. So they are completely different. They really behave for the email address completely different than compared to the other website. So do you think the API has to be given more focus than the UI of your application? It's up to you again. And the last question, the final question, what to automate a lot in your application? Is that end-to-end, or is that integration, or is that the unit testing? So because we have been discussing about the testing pyramid a lot from the unit testing perspective, from the integration perspective, and from the UI testing perspective, now the question comes is, which one has to be given the highest precedence? So for this question, there are so many discussion happened in the Google blog, which released in 2004. They really discussed about this particular topic a lot. And they said, like, is it really important to do an end-to-end test? Which was kind of a nightmare for the author, I guess, because there were so many different arguments started with that particular post from the Google, and then a lot of people were slashing on that particular topic because the discussion was completely irrelevant. Because as you can see, the end-to-end testing of your application exactly depends on the kind of your application basically. So for instance, if your application has a code base which is going to be maybe it's very, very small, but the flow in the UI with different user roles and different kind of products which is going to be displayed within that particular application, if that's going to happen for a single page application, then probably you can see that the UI testing is going to take highest precedence than the unit testing itself. So basically the UI testing is going to have a lot of different flows, and you can see there will be like hundreds and thousands of test cases that for that particular heavy application, because the UI itself is very, very heavy. Whereas the unit testing is going to comprise around somewhere like a 500 or 600 unit test cases, but you can see in a controversy the UI testing will have somewhere around 1000 or 1500 test cases. So you can see that the unit testing is going to be like just 500 test cases, whereas the UI testing is going to have like 1500 test cases, which is more than 2 times or 3 times than the unit testing itself. So now you can see that for the complexity of your application or for the context of your application, you're going to have these tests as the highest precedence, or maybe you'll be doing a lot of testing in that particular layer rather the unit testing layer. So now you should ask a question yourself that whether you're going to do an end-to-end automation, or maybe you're going to write a lot of test cases for the integration layer than compared to the unit testing as well as for the UI testing. And because your API or the service that you are going to be consuming or writing the test cases for, if it is not a public API, there are a lot of chances that that particular API is also going to change based on the change request of your application's feature. So that's what happens in your UI of your application as well. Because if there is any new feature being introduced, they're going to change not just the UI of your application, they're also going to add some functionality or feature within the API so that that particular change is going to reflect in the particular UI. So then the debate comes that changing the code for the API is much easier than changing the code in the UI. It's again the trade-off, guys. If you're going to build a framework which is going to be more easily changeable based on the changes that you're going to make for the application, then it is very easy for changing the UI of your application code base pretty much exactly like how you change the code base of the integration testing. So that's exactly how it works. So if you can change something much easily in API testing, that's exactly going to happen even for the UI testing layer as well. But just that to resolve the issue, it takes a lot of time because you need to identify what has broken and things of the nature if you don't know the changes has happened in the API or maybe in the logic of your applications. And it's going to be one-time failure. You can easily fix that as well. So if you want to end-to-end automate the API, just ask yourself whether that is really worth it to automate the integration layer of your application, because that's not something which the consumer is going to see. So basically, consumer is the one who is going to use the application. So if we automate an application, we should not just automate our application on the context of the developer or a tester. We should automate on the context of a consumer. So consumer is the one who's going to use the application. So if we build an application based on the context of a consumer, then the application is going to be considered, or maybe is deemed to be the best user experience of an application than the actual developer or tester who is going to actually think that that's what is the actual release or functionality of an application. Again, as a summary, which layer actually plays a key role? Unit testing, integration, or UI testing completely depends on the type and nature of the application actually is built. If we don't realize the nature of our application, and if we start following the testing pyramid, then probably we'll be ending up in a lot of problems. And once again, tell me, what do you think? Whether whatever we have discussed right now, or maybe whatever I have discussed right now, has got some problems, or maybe what do you think, whether the UI testing takes a lot of less precedence compared to the unit testing and the integration testing? Just let me know. So let me know what you think in the comments below. If you think that the discussion has dragged, or maybe it is not something which you think, or maybe what your company follows, just put that in the comment below. That helps me to learn something as well, and not only just me, the community who's going to watch this video and watch your comments is going to help everybody. Once again, thank you very much for watching this video, and have a great day.